guy in the NBA should ever wear 23.
I've been working on that shot my whole life, and for that one to go in, that was liberating right there, man.
And I'm not shoving it aside, like it don't mean anything. I know it's important. I do. I honestly do. But we talking about
23 Shots to JD podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to the 23 Shots to JD's new series 30 and 10, essentially where we break down 30 teams 10 days before the season. And before we actually just break down some of the teams, the reason why I wanted to do 30 and 10 is that I thought 10 days before the season would be enough time to, cause let's be honest, you wouldn't think that there'll be a lot of changes 10 days before the season, but I guess what sort of arose is the firing of the Suns GM 8 days before the season, so I thought I'd just address that off top. It's a bit interesting. They do have James Jones, who's going to be taking a bit of a lead in the basketball operations side of things, and then the assistant GM is probably going to do more of obviously the GM work and stuff like that. But yeah, probably not the way that the Phoenix Suns wanted to start. Obviously they wanted, they just got their new number one draft pick. They have such a great young core. They signed a lot of veterans, stuff like that. So you'd think that they were gonna, try and have a more consistent, stable season. But even before the season starts, it's not even like that. So bit interesting. But I'll just sort of move on to the breakdown. So we're gonna start off with the Denver Nuggets. So Denver, what can you say about Denver? They're sort of everyone's favorite, or not favorite team, I should say, but everyone's team that they think is going to progress great this season. But just a bit of a view of what happened or transpired last season. They're sort of, again, one of those surprise teams. You look at their team and no real superstar. I guess as the season emerged, it sort of became apparent that Nikola Jokic is just an absolute beast at the center position. Probably, in my opinion, a top 5 center. Even you could even maybe put him a bit high depending on how you feel. But just an all-round guy. I think he sort of fits that sort of Arvydas Sabonis type mold where he's just a playmaker in the pinch post and all that great stuff, and really allows the other players on this team like Gary Harris and Jamal Murray and stuff like that to really flourish and be more of just a scorer than really just a primary ball handler. And I think what Nikola Jokic provides is really much a point of difference in the NBA, and that allows the Denver Nuggets to play a different type of style that maybe not a lot of teams are accustomed to playing. So yeah, a surprise team. They didn't make the playoffs. They just missed out in the last week, with that whole Western Conference clog between, I think it was 6 and 9 or 6 and 10 basically. So they were sadly the team that missed out, and they missed out last year as well. So they consistently missing out, which is obviously, I guess, disappointing. But with the young core that the Nuggets have, it's probably definitely a step in the right direction. And like I said, a lot of teams are looking at them. A lot of people like myself are looking at this team as a side that's going to really cause a lot of damage and really push these sort of main staples, like I said, like sort of the Spurs, the Trailblazers and stuff like that. Try and push them out of the playoff picture and really emerge as one of the key figures within the Western Conference. But I think it was a bit disappointing though that their season didn't get to go as well as they did, because Paul Millsap did get injured early in the season. He had a 3-month injury, which sort of, I wouldn't even say slow down, but I guess when his integration came in, or when he had to be reintegrated into the lineup, it just didn't work out as well as you hoped. And I think especially what the leadership and just the experience that Paul Millsap brings, he's a former All-Star. He made it to the Eastern Conference Finals with, Al Horford and Jeff Teague at the Atlanta Hawks. So he definitely has that type of experience and that leadership and that veteran savviness. And I think definitely coming into this year or this season, he's going to be a really vital aspect of the team. But obviously last year didn't really get to assert his sort of leadership style and stuff like that. But definitely Paul Millsap, big disappointment. And perhaps maybe if he did, play at the start of the season or even the full season, you could probably see a lot more. Maybe you could have seen that the Denver Nuggets could have progressed to the to the Western Conference, not to Western. Gee, I really can't talk today. It's sort of that the Phoenix Suns, finally sort of threw me off a bit, and the whole UFC stuff. I had a couple mates come over to the place and we watched that as well. So bit of a fried weekend and all that stuff, but you gotta get right into it. And like I said, if Paul Millsap started with a full season, I think they could have made the playoffs quite, maybe not comfortably, but they would have made the playoffs nonetheless. So just an overall look at what they did last year. A solid team, but just missed the playoffs. So they're definitely going to be looking to progress further this year. And I guess sort of what they did in the summer, how they going to aid in trying to become a playoff team. They re-signed Jokic, the Joker. Of course, they had to re-sign Jokic because the guy's just an absolute animal. Just a beast all around, like I've sort of mentioned before. And they re-signed Will Barton. He's sort of one of those guys, a solid role player, can fill a role in the starting team as well. But, I wouldn't say he's going to be sort of a critical play in the team, but definitely someone that has great utility value and stuff like that. But I guess the biggest thing, in my opinion, that they did in the summer was definitely the draft. They were in an interesting position in the middle of the first round. I think 15th maybe. I think they were 15th. So definitely that weird position where they're just outside the lottery. So not getting these premier picks that everyone sort of looked at as your sort of DeAndre Ayton's, Bagley's, Doncic's, all that great stuff. But just somehow the Nuggets got lucky and they able to get Michael Porter Jr., who before the draft or even before the college season was the number one player in the country. People forget. Everyone thought he was a Kevin Durant type player. Ball handling probably a question mark, but Michael Porter Jr. could just drill it from anywhere in the 3-point line. Led the number one team in the country, number one high school team in the country, and obviously you could say all this great stuff about him, but I think the reason why he dropped down to 15 was his back injuries. And when you're 18 and 19 and you have to have back surgery, that's a pretty big issue. That's a pretty big problem if you have back problems at such a young age. Well, any really type of medical problem at that young age, it's pretty terrible. So I guess there's obvious reason why Michael Porter Jr. dropped down, but I think the value that the Nuggets are going to get out of him at 15 is probably something that you can't pass up on. And if he does progress, as maybe it's not going to be Kevin Durant. I remember, he had interviews at the, with NBA GMs and stuff like that, saying that he's like a mix between Kobe Bryant and Kevin Durant and Tracy McGrady. And you're like, bro, shut up. You're not going to be that good, especially at the start of your career. But he maybe he could progress like that. Maybe he's sort of got that air of confidence about him. But I think Michael Porter Jr. at the 15th position, even if he doesn't progress to be what he looks out to be, or even what college scouts or high school analysts thought it was going to be, I think if he gets even 50 to 60% of his potential, I think he could really be a solid player for the Nuggets. And at the 15th pick, man, if he's anywhere from 60% to 100%, you really did a great job at in picking him up. Well, I guess you didn't really do much, so it just fell in your lap because the Clippers, sort of fluffed it. But we'll talk about that when we get to the Clippers. But in addition to that, they did a couple big trades, especially with their sort of main staples in the starting lineup. Wilson Chandler got traded to the 76ers. A bit of a salary dump because the Nuggets were in deep luxury tax implications, and any owner doesn't want to pay that exorbitant amount of money. So they traded Wilson Chandler, who sort of was a decent player. When he got traded to the Knicks for Carmelo Anthony, everyone thought that he could maybe fill a Carmelo Anthony type role, but I think with injuries and sort of, I guess, his age and stuff like that, it sort of stagnated. And he's going to be a solid player, definitely for the 76ers, like he was with the Nuggets, but again, he's not going to be a game-changing type player. So I think it was an appropriate move for the Nuggets, and obviously with the financial implications, it made a lot more sense. And again, that sort of follows a similar line with Kenneth Faried getting traded to the Brooklyn Nets. Again, I think Kenneth Faried was been on the trading block for ages. They've been wanting to trade him. I think his contract was probably not the most ideal, and people forget, like, Kenneth Faried, I think, he won a world championship with, Team America. Like, he was part of the USA team. He won the MVP of the rookie sophomore game. So he had a lot of promise about him. But as we sort of seen with the NBA, his type of play, sort of the inside rebound dominating type guy, with that, that's sort of moved away. You need your fours to be able to shoot the three, and I think Kenneth Faried is already undersized as it is, and without him being able to really provide offensively, I think his skill set is sort of been what's the best way to say it? Sort of been just put to the side, and that his play is not really relevant in this type of game. So sad to see, because Kenneth Faried was one of my favorite players. The Manimal, that's a sick nickname to be called the Manimal, but nevertheless, Kenneth Faried to the Brooklyn Nets, and when we get to the Nets, we'll sort of talk about his impact and stuff like that. But also another big signing that sort of not a lot of people are talking about is the signing of Isaiah Thomas. So obviously Isaiah Thomas, he played with the Celtics, was top 5 MVP candidate, was looking for a fat contract, and he gets injured. He gets that hip flex injury that sort of put him out for 7-8 months, and injury is such a bitch in these games. But with Isaiah Thomas, it's probably hurt him the most, because he was due for maybe a 5-year, $120 million contract or something like that with the Celtics. Then he gets traded to the Cavs, and the whole, him and LeBron chemistry didn't work out. He sort of fell out of favor with not only the Cavs organization, but a lot of NBA fans as well, because they thought it was too arrogant. I myself thought it was really arrogant, and, early in the podcast when we first started this, one of the key focuses was on this sort of arrogance that Isaiah Thomas had, and I sort of turned on that because it sort of felt bad for him. The guy's 5'9", playing in the NBA. He's already had a tough run. He was the last pick in the draft. He's built his way up to this position where he's viewed, only 2 years ago, the top 5 player in the NBA, and now at it, with the demise of his sort of career within that 1 year span last year, as he jumped from the Celtics to the Cavaliers, and obviously the Cavaliers just shrugged him off, and then he went to the Lakers, and you would think that maybe it would be more of a superstar, but obviously with Lonzo Ball at the helm, it sort of didn't work out that well. Even though a lot of players liked him, apparently Luke Walton, even Magic Johnson and stuff, sort of thought that his leadership that he brought was really valuable to the young players, like your Kuzmas and your Ingrams, your Lonzos, your Josh Harts and stuff like that. So he definitely is a great player, and I think if he can get back to any type of form that he had with the Celtics, he's going to be a massive piece for the Denver Nuggets. Even if he plays in a sort of 6-man position where he runs the second unit, or even if he goes into the starting lineup, maybe in place of sort of like a Jamal Murray or something like that. Just maybe give that playoff experience and stuff like that. So, Isaiah Thomas, I think it's going to be sort of path of redemption, and sort of moving on to what we should expect. I think with Isaiah Thomas at least, expect him to try and get back to the form that he did. He's going to be in that road to redemption. He's going to try and prove all the people that sort of not only hated on him, but just disregarded his abilities. He's going to showcase a lot. And I think the most important thing, like I said, what he did with the Lakers is showcase his leadership, his ability to harness the younger people and be able to show that veteran savviness. So definitely look at Isaiah Thomas to be a very critical part of at least this season for the Denver Nuggets. And again, moving with the Denver Nuggets, I sort of repeated throughout this episode that the Denver Nuggets are going to be looking to make the playoffs. I think they are going to make the playoffs. I think that what they've been able to do, with Isaiah Thomas, I think the step up by Jokic. Jamal Murray had big improvements last year after being sort of maybe even viewed as a first year bust. They just have a really solid team, and I think with their coach as well, I think who it is, Mike Malone, they just have a sort of air about them that they could really make damage in the Western Conference without having that sort of globalized superstar. But Jokic, like I said, an absolute beast. They're going to keep building that young core, like I said, with Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, Jokic. We'll see what goes on with Michael Porter Jr., see if he's able to have any valuable game time. Obviously they re-signed Barton. They just got a lot of young pieces. Also, shout out to Torrey Craig, who used to play in the NBL. He's got re-signed, so just a lot of good pieces that they can really implement and try and defeat these Western Conference juggernauts. And they're gonna be a surprise team to emerge, and sort of what they're gonna definitely build on what happened last year and look to again replicate that this year, if not even better. So I guess moving to maybe one of those teams that might be losing their spot to the Nuggets is the Portland Trailblazers. And Portland Trailblazers is just an interesting team to review, because if you look at last year, they exceeded all expectations. They were really the surprise team in the West. Really solid team. You had Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, just probably one of the best backcourts in the NBA. They just re-signed Nurkic. Nurkic was going to have a full season with the Trailblazers, and Nurkic is a really solid center. Probably not a standout center, but really, really solid, and ironically was traded by the Nuggets, so I guess that's some type of synergy. But yeah, surprised him in the West, and I think they were definitely making noise. I think they ended up being there was a third spot in the West. They were top 3 team. Like, just think about that in the West with, the Juggernauts. They had that OKC team. They had who also had the Spurs. You had, obviously Golden State, Houston Rockets. There's a lot of teams in the Western Conference, and, Trailblazers really proved that they were one of the top teams, especially last year at that time. But I guess it sort of all fell off in the playoffs, and sort of the problems that people had in the regular season were sort of overshadowed by the regular season efforts. But those problems arose in their playoffs when they got swept by the Pelicans. The Pelicans just put them to town. Rondo just read every play they were able to do, and the problems that people had with the Blazers before sort of arose, and now we see there's definitely going to be rumors about trades and stuff like that coming into this season. But again, there was a solid team. One of those teams built for the regular season, and it was really evident as it came to the playoffs that they weren't able to do anything. Damian Lillard just disappeared. His shooting percentage was garbage. CJ McCollum played pretty good, but not as good as you want from one of the sort of top 10 shooting guys in the league. And like I said, coming into this, you're definitely going to hear rumors about one of the two potentially getting traded, or definitely some moves happening and stuff like that. Like there was rumors about Damian Lillard getting traded to the Lakers for Lonzo. So, really don't know what's going to happen. But in the summer, they drafted Anthony Simons, who was the high school. They picked him straight out of high school, which it's one of those draft picks where it's like you don't need a guard. You have 2 solidified guards. And they picked Anthony Simons. Maybe he could be a pet project. Again, one of those Fran Fraschilla phrases where he goes, he's 2 years away from being 2 years away. And that's definitely what I see from Anthony Simons. He played decent in the Summer League. He's a solid player, from the IMG Academy. So he's definitely, viewed in high regards. He was a top 10 high school recruit. So, I think he's going to be decent. He's going to be solid. But I think maybe him not going to college and opting for the NBA, obviously, there's some financial factors in that, evidently, but I think for his development, his growth as an NBA player, maybe he should have gone to college, but, that's just my personal opinion. They picked up Gary Trent Jr. as well in the draft, who I think is going to prove his dad. I think he's someone that's definitely underrated. People forget that he was also a top 20 high school recruit when he came in, and he came into Duke and just didn't, showcase what he was meant to showcase. I think the high profile people in this team, people like Marvin Bagley, obviously, Wendell Carter Jr., along with one of his guard teammates in Trevor DeVore, they really it was a clash of all these superstars. Think about it logically. Like, all these guys were the guy in their team, the guy in their state, the guy in their position in the whole country, and they all come into one team, and now they got to share the ball around. There's only one ball. There's 5 players on the team, and 4 of them were superstars in their own respective teams. So it's going to be a bit hard for them to adjust. And I think people like Gary Trent Jr. weren't able to really adjust accordingly, with the domination that sort of Marvin Bagley had, and sort of how they really pushed for a front court heavy offense. So, Gary Trent Jr., I think he's sort of a steal. I think he was worthy of a first round pick by any team, but obviously he sort of fell in the draft because of his whole season with Duke and stuff. But definitely he's going to try and prove his doubters wrong. And even though I said their guard position at the Trailblazers is sort of solidified with the top 2, I think Gary Trent Jr. is definitely one of those players that could sort of find himself in the rotation and play some really, really decent minutes. So watch out for him. But mate, if the Blazers didn't want any more guards, they picked up Nick Stauskas, who sort of looking like a lottery bust. Picked number 7 by the Sacramento Kings. He's jumped around team for team. So what are you against Stephen Stauskas? Hopefully he can have a re-emergence. But that championship run he had with Michigan and stuff like that. Sort of, I don't know. I feel bad for Stauskas because, man, people thought it was gonna be like Steph Curry-esque, but didn't really gonna pan out like that. And he's probably just gonna be a solid 3-point, option, spread the floor and stuff like that. So he might get some minutes, but I would obviously or evidently prefer Gary Trent Jr. over Stauskas in my opinion. Just age and just what he can provide as well. But I guess talking about the Currys as well, Steph Curry's brother, Seth Curry, signed with the Blazers. And again, another guard. He had experience with the Dallas Mavericks. He had a pretty decent season with a team that had no hope. So, who knows what's going to happen with Seth Curry. It's coming off an injury as well, so we don't know. I don't know how much game time he's going to get initially. But again, we know what we're going to get from him. He's sort of Steph Curry, except a lot worse, which, he probably hears it a lot, and it's probably insensitive to say about him, but what can you say? It's Seth Curry. He's going to give you a bit of decent spreading of the floor, decent playmaker as well, but again, you already have two solidified guys. What more do you want? And like I sort of said or alluded to before, they re-signed Nurkic, so it's solidified that center position for the meantime, and definitely going to look to use him as one of the more focal points in the offense. But it's just disappointing to see what we're going to expect for them. I wrote down some notes, and it just seems like they're not going to make the playoffs. I think there's just too much drama, and that's it's a ridiculous statement to say. They were the top 3 team in the Western Conference, and now they're not even going to make the top 8. But like I said, with the Lakers, the Mavericks, the Nuggets. There's just so many teams there that's going to really look to fight for a spot in the playoffs. And with the Blazers and sort of the drama that's ensuing, between the two guards, can they coexist? Are they able to play together? Like I mentioned with Gary Trent Jr. and his sort of Duke team, it's a similar situation. You've got 2 dominant ball handlers, you've got 2 dominant scorers, and it's a bit hard for both of them to coexist. So, we'll see. Like I said, there's definitely going to be some trade rumors swirling around. I don't think they're going to be sort of in the playoffs. They'll definitely be part of the playoff picture nonetheless. They'll definitely be fighting for position, but in my opinion, if I'm going to have my top 8, they're not going to be in my top 8. And again, like I mentioned, can Dame and CJ coexist? I don't think so. And if you're going to look at who would you have, I think I'd rather have CJ because shooting guards are really coming at a premium. So there's a lot of point guards that you can find. So maybe you could see Damian Lillard moved, and that'll be an interesting trade if that ever happens. Because Dame Lillard is a superstar talent. Like he had his own little segment in 2K18. Like this guy, he has his own shoe. He has his own rap album. Like this guy sort of is really a pop culture type of dude. And to see him get traded because he's not really wanted on the team or not really worth having on the team, it'll be interesting to see. Mate, maybe because just. Dude, imagine if you did a diss track on the Blazers. That would be pretty funny. But I guess moving to another team with a lot of drama, and it'll be the final team that I'll mention today, is the Minnesota Timberwolves. So what can we say about the Minnesota Timberwolves? Just a team that had a lot of promise coming into the start of last season. They had a team that could finally fight for the playoffs, and they haven't made the playoffs in, I think it was like 15, 16 years or something like that. So they had they had the longest drought at the time of not making the playoffs. And to make sure they made the playoffs, they made some big moves. They traded for Jimmy Butler, which, as I sort of mentioned before when I analyzed the Chicago Bulls last episode. It was a big trade. They traded LaVine. They traded the number 7 pick. Traded Chris Dunn just for Jimmy Butler. And, in hindsight, maybe it wasn't the best move, but definitely at the time, everyone thought that the Minnesota Timberwolves got the best end of the deal. They thought they absolutely fleeced the Chicago Bulls and were able to get, I would say he's a superstar talent. I think he's a superstar. Some people might disagree, but I think definitely he was a superstar at the start of the season. And in addition to getting Jimmy Butler, they solidified their point guard position by getting Jeff Teague. Obviously, they had Ricky Rubio at the helm for a lot of years, and I think it just wasn't working, that type of relationship he had. So they're bringing a new point guard in Jeff Teague. Again, similar to Paul Millsap with the Nuggets. He was going to provide that veteran experience. He's been to the Eastern Conference playoffs. He knows what it takes to win. He's played in big games, and I think Jeff Teague was definitely a solid signing. Even to this day, I think he was a solid signing. But they definitely have a team that was a playoff team, like I mentioned. Jeff Teague, Jimmy Butler. Then you bring in the two number one picks in Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, who are both sort of emerging into what their potential is. So they definitely have one of those teams that look like they could make noise in the playoffs, but as we sort of know and looking at your hindsight, it definitely didn't work out the best way it should have. But I think the Minnesota Timberwolves definitely built a core group for the future. They had Jimmy Butler, again, a leader, Jeff Teague, a leader, and then they have such a great group of young guys. Like I mentioned, Wiggins, Cat, Gorgie Jang. They drafted Justin Patton. So they definitely had a great sort of youthful aroma to them, coupled with that veteran leadership type of experience. But throughout the whole regular season, there was sort of MVP considerations to Jimmy Butler. He was solid offensively, solid defensively. He's sort of leading that team, and even midway through the regular season, that team was floating around a top 5, even close to a top 4 team at one point. So, that's the reason as well why Karl Anthony Towns was able to be an All-Star in just, I think, his third year. He's only like 20, 21, so definitely, I think, well-deserved. He puts up big stats, 20 and 10 guy religiously, even when he was sort of a rookie. So I think definitely deserved his All-Star appearance in consideration with his stats and the team's position as well. But sort of that, as soon as sort of the All-Star break happened, all the turmoil and the conflict within the team arose. So as sort of what's come apparent to us in the off-season with Jimmy Butler wanting to get traded or wanting to leave and stuff, it sort of became clear that he didn't like Andrew Wiggins, and sort of the issue that Andrew Wiggins has had and what people had. He was picked number 1, but there was definitely some conjecture about him being picked number 1. They think he didn't have the heart, he didn't have the motor, he didn't have the passion for the sport, and that he was able to survive off sheer athleticism. Like his dad was the next NBA player. His mom was a silver medalist in sprinting at the Olympics. So, definitely some insane genetics. And, the guy was insane. I think he had like a 45-inch vertical or something in high school. This guy's a freak. But again, there were just reasons why people, didn't like Wiggins. Like I said, just his overall love for the game was missing, and I think Jimmy Butler was able to see that in the locker room, and that when Wiggins got his massive contract, I think it was like 5 years, $150 million, which it's sort of deserved. He's 22, averages 20 points per game. He's sort of, again, one of the cornerstones for your franchise, but Butler didn't see it. He saw that Wiggins was a base, all intensive purposes, a bitch. Didn't want to play hard. Didn't want to, be really part of that team environment. He could sort of being a sort of solo act and playing for the stats rather than playing for the wins. And, that whole turmoil was sort of built internally. And then that sort of just degraded the whole season. They went basically, like I said, they were a top 4 team, and they just scraped into the playoffs. Like literally scraped. Like they made it to the 8th position, and that versus the Houston Rockets in the first round. And they got stamped. They got destroyed by the Houston Rockets. I think they won one game, but that was sort of just a pity game they won and made it to the playoffs, but bounced. And even if you're a Timberwolves fan, you might have been happy that they finally made the playoffs, but barely scraping in and not even putting up a fair fight on the Houston Rockets. You might as well just not even made the playoffs at all. So, I guess sort of I've already alluded to the offseason, the whole drama with Jimmy Butler and stuff like that. It was pretty terrible. But they did some stuff in the summer. They drafted Josh Okogie, who's I think a decent pick, a solid pick, sort of in that mold of a Tony Allen, Patrick Beverley, super defensive, but can definitely give you something on the offensive side as well. And a sort of underrated pick that they got as well was Keita Bates-Diop, the Big Ten Player of the Year from Ohio State. And I think he definitely was worthy of a first-round pick, but that's sort of just conjecture again, just subjective. You could see if you want. You could sort of view him as a top a top round pick or whatever. But I think Kato Bates-Diop, especially what we've been able to see in the summer league, the guy had like 10 blocks in one game. This guy's an absolute beast. Small forward position, he has a decent 3-shot around him. He can score, he can defend, and I think, especially depending on what they do with Jimmy Butler, if they trade him or whatnot, I think Kato Bates-Diop can definitely get some great rotation minutes at one of the 2 forwards position and definitely showcase why he should have been a first round pick and whatnot. But in addition, they picked up Anthony Tolliver because they got rid of Bielitsa. They picked up Tolliver, decent 3-point shooter again. He had an alright season with the Detroit Pistons, but he's not a game changer. He's not a mover. He's not going to move the needle to them getting any better in the playoff picture. So, that's sort of what I said about Anthony Tolliver is probably the most anyone had said about Anthony Tolliver. That sort of talks about Anthony Tolliver. So, but I guess sort of the biggest meme of the whole summer, especially just in regards to the whole NBA, is the whole Timberwolves situation. Tom Thibodeau signing all basically his old Chicago Bulls players. They already had Jimmy Butler. They signed Derrick Rose last year. Then they bring out Luol Deng. They already had Taj Gibson as well. They basically had 4 of the 5, and there was even rumors that they're going to sign Joakim Noah, and that would have just been cringe if they signed the whole Bulls team. But again, that whole Timberwolves situation, it made sense at the time, and I think it makes sense now why Tom Thibodeau wanted to do that. He wanted to, I guess, probably have Butler stay. I think there's definitely a conflict between the older heads and the younger heads in the team. And I think Thibodeau wanted people that Butler was familiarized around with, who he sort of got leadership and gained experience from. Like I said, your Noahs, your Gibsons, your Butlers, also your Roses and your Dangs. So it made sense why now if they move Jimmy Butler, you basically just have a deadbeat team that's 8, 9 years past where it was meant to be. So, it's just ironic how things sort of go full 180, and it's just cringe to see the Timberwolves situation. But again, what should we expect from them this season? Again, it's one of those teams that's just hard to tell. Even though Jimmy Butler's asked for a trade, even though there's so much turmoil in the locker room, he still said he wants to play. He wants to contribute to the team. Nonetheless, if he's healthy, he did get injured in the offseason, but he said if he's healthy, he wants to play at the start of the season. So yeah, he still wants to play. It's not no Kawhi Leonard situation where Kawhi refused to play. He sat out pretending he had an injury and stuff like that. Jimmy Butler actually wants to play. So, I guess it sort of shows his maturity that even though he knows that he's not going to be with the team, he still wants to contribute as just an NBA player and act just like a straight professional. Again, like I said, it's one of those teams that you don't know. So are they going to progress? Are they going to get higher? I'm not too sure. Are they going to regress? Again, I'm just not too sure. So it's one of those teams that in those no man's land teams that I mentioned, your Charlotte Hornets and stuff like that. Just a team that's like sort of on the cusp, but they're not really going to make much damage, but they could easily just fall and falter and not be a team that contributes at all in the playoff picture. So if I was going to do a proper straight prediction, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. Again, the Nuggets are going to be hungry, as I mentioned. You got the Lakers, and if LeBron James is going to be in the playoffs no matter what, so he's going to be. So that's really 2 spots they got to leave. And as I mentioned, I think the Blazers are going to be one of them, and don't be surprised if the Timberwolves are going to be one of them. So definitely look at those 2 teams as one. And yeah, it's sad to see because especially the Timberwolves again didn't make the playoffs for 16 years. Finally make the playoffs, and now they're not going to make the playoffs again. Must be heart-wrenching for a Minnesota fan. So definitely prepare yourselves for the worst. And I think, again, with all this conjecture about Wiggins and if he's actually passionate about basketball, if he's actually wants to play basketball and stuff like that, I think it's going to be a defining season for him to see if he's really a dud. Because even though he would never be recognized as the boss because he does average 20 points per game, he was meant to be the face of the franchise. And I think Cat coming in sort of erased that at all. But I think Wiggins could definitely be, he should be a 25 point per game scorer. He has all the tools. Super athletic. He can shoot okay, but everything that you need in a basketball player, Wiggins has. Just physically. This guy had a long wingspan. He's tall. He's perfect position. He's not too heavy. Like, he's just athletically a gifted basketball player. It just seems that the passion and the drive that he has is just not apparent. So, Wiggins definitely got to prove to the people, to the media, to myself, to the fans and all that stuff. Even his own franchise, that he's worthy of the contract and that he deserves to be the number one pick and that he deserves to be recognized as one of the premier small forwards in the league. But again, as I mentioned before, Cat has sort of become that franchise piece. But again, with Carlton Towns, and even at the start of the year when it was me and David on the podcast, we talked so much about Carlton Towns not being great defensively. Like, this guy, again, he looks like he just plays for the stats. And is he a guy that you want to be the face of the franchise? Even though he has all the talent, he's an all-star. He's one of the best young players at his position. Just really everything about him, he's sort of really marketable. He's already played, Team USA type, scrimmages and stuff like that. So he's definitely in the face as one of the at least top 30, even top 25, top 20 type players. But I think his lack of, again, passion and drive, sort of similar to Wiggins, it's sort of concerning, especially if you want him to be your franchise piece. But, again, that's going to be up to the Minnesota Timberwolves staff. And, as a team, Minnesota, no one wants to go to Minnesota at all. Like, Minnesota's just that random place that people just live. That's not a team that's going to get you that more sponsorship deals. Not going to get you that sort of fame and glory that you might want outside. I think Kevin Garnett was able to transcend that because he was just, he was like one of the best players at his time. So he was able to transcend that notion of being in a small market team. But I think Carlton Towns and Wiggins as well, they both might want to up their game, or they're just not gonna be in favor with the Minnesota team, and the Minnesota Timberwolves that themselves might have to look at the man and go, maybe we should move them for some bigger pace and stuff like that. I don't think so because, like I said, who wants to go to Minnesota? But nonetheless, maybe something that the GMs might want to think about. And I think just overall the team, I sort of mentioned that it's a sort of defining season for Wiggins. Again, it's a defining season for the Timberwolves as a whole. It's really a make-or-break season for most of their players, even your coach, Tom Thibodeau. There's just so many interlinking aspects that make them be in this path where they could only go one way and progress and be one of those main staples in the Western Conference for the years to come with their young, solid core. Or they could completely go south and, Wiggins is a dud. Carlton Towns just doesn't, he's all stats but no real value in regards to wins. He could be sort of a DeMarcus Cousins type player. So there's just so much real room to go one way or the other. And I think what we should expect for them is to really go one direction or the other. I think they're either going to be a team that you look at and like, all right, they're definitely going to make the playoffs this year, or a team where you go, all this sort of drama and this conflict within the team coupled with the type of players and the roster they have is going to make them miss the playoffs. So it's definitely sad to see because Timberwolves, I think I mentioned in a podcast ages ago, they're like sort of Australia's team. A lot of Australians like the Timberwolves for some reason. I think it's because they're young, they're impressionable. But I remember, like I sort of mentioned the story before, like I was at like a kebab shop and these guys were having a massive conversation about the Timberwolves, and you're just like, how's the Timberwolves even? They have no Aussie players. There's like real no relation. But if they're able to be this international, surely there'll be other people in like Europe and stuff that might like the Timberwolves as well. So it's just sad to see that maybe their fans should expect the worst, but sort of just a game with basketball and stuff like that. But I sort of ended here. Obviously, I sort of try to couple all these teams that are in sort of the Western Conference playoff picture. It's a bit interesting to see because I sort of talked about one team that's going to progress, one team I think is definitely going to regress, and then another team that's sort of in that middle area. So definitely, this Western Conference is a complete beast, and I think teams that don't get their act together are really going to show in the back door. But I end it here. Yeah. Bye.